Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to do a really fascinating deep dive. We're going to be talking about some of the more surprising signs of depression. I was doing some reading for this whole Health Reset series, and it got me thinking about how depression can manifest in ways we just don't anticipate.
Yeah.
And beyond, just classic sadness, there's all these kind of subtler signs that we can easily overlook.
Right.
So let's unpack that. What are some of the signs that might make us go, maybe something else is at play here?
It's a bit like a detective game in a way. We're looking for those kind of like hidden pieces of the puzzle.
Okay.
And one of the first things that often pops up is irritability.
Irritability, really?
Yeah.
And we all get cranky from time to time.
Absolutely. But with depression, it can be much more like intense and frequent.
Okay.
Like little things that wouldn't normally bother you suddenly feel like major annoyances. It's almost like you have a shorter fuse and you're much more likely to snap at people or get frustrated really easily.
Wow, okay. I hadn't really considered it in those terms before. So what's happening in the brain that's causing that shift in our reactions?
Well, depression affects the way our brains regulate emotions.
Got it.
And certain neurotransmitters, like serotonin, for example, play a huge role in that process. So when those neurotransmitter levels are out of whack, it can make it much harder to manage those emotional responses, hence the increased irritability.
So it's not just like a matter of choosing to be less irritable.
Yeah.
There's an actual biological underpinning happening.
Exactly. It's not just a mindset thing.
Okay. That's helpful to understand.
Mm.
All right, let's move on to the next clue in our little detective game here. This one was a little surprising to me. Nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
I love thinking about the good old days, but, research is suggesting that maybe excessive nostalgia could be kind of a red flag.
It is surprising, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think we all get nostalgic from time to time, but when you're constantly longing for the past and almost like you're feeling stuck there, it can sometimes be a way of actually avoiding dealing with difficult emotions that are happening in the present moment.
Right.
Like you're almost kind of escaping the present by living in the past.
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
This next one is a bit out there, and I have to admit, I chuckled a little bit when I first read it.
Okay.
Constipation.
Interesting.
Apparently, there is a strong connection between constipation and depression.
Yeah.
Is that for real?
Well, you're not alone in your reaction. I mean, it does seem a little bit strange at first glance, right?
Yeah.
But remember that whole gut-brain connection we've talked about before?
Right.
Well, a large percentage of our serotonin, that mood-regulating neurotransmitter, is actually produced in the gut. So when our gut health is a bit off, it can totally have a knock-on effect on our mental well-being.
So taking care of our gut can actually potentially help improve our mood.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like all these seemingly unrelated things are all interconnected in some way.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The body is this amazing interconnected system.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to another one that was a little bit unexpected to me, which is feeling stressed when you have downtime.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, you'd think relaxing is kind of the perfect antidote to depression.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
But for some folks, a wide open calendar, nothing to do, that can trigger anxiety.
Yeah, that's so counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah. So why would downtime be stressful?
Well, it's often because that unstructured time can be like a breeding ground for rumination.
Okay.
So when you don't have anything planned, it can be super easy for negative thoughts to creep in.
Right.
And they kind of take over. It's almost like your mind gets stuck in this loop, just replaying worries and anxieties. And without those external distractions or activities to break that cycle, those feelings of stress and overwhelm can just really build up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I imagine that can bleed into difficulty concentrating as well, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's hard to focus when your mind's racing with all those anxious thoughts.
Exactly. It's like trying to read a book with someone shouting in your ear. It's really hard to take anything in.
Yeah, exactly.
And those intrusive thoughts, they just consume your mental bandwidth and make it really hard to focus on anything else. It can actually even get misdiagnosed as ADHD in some cases.
It's wild.
It is.
And speaking of things that can be hard to resist, the research also mentions impulsive shopping as a potential sign.
Oh, right.
I mean, we've all been there, right? Like late night online shopping spree, adding things to our cart.
Yeah.
But for someone who's grappling with depression, it can become kind of excessive.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, shopping can give you this, like, temporary hit of dopamine.
Okay.
That feel-good neurotransmitter. So it's like this quick fix to numb those, like, unpleasant feelings.
Right.
But the thing is, like all quick fixes, it doesn't actually deal with the root cause.
Yeah.
And it can actually make things worse, lead to financial stress, more feelings of guilt. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It might cover it for a second, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, this next one's a little bit more personal and can be hard to talk about, but it's struggling with personal hygiene.
Yeah.
I know it might seem like kind of a small thing,
Yeah.
but it can actually be a sign that there's something deeper going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not a matter of laziness or just lack of caring.
Okay.
It's really about the effects that depression has on motivation and energy levels.
Hmm.
When you're feeling completely drained and overwhelmed, even basic tasks like showering or brushing your teeth can feel like climbing Mount Everest.
Right.
It's important to approach this with a lot of compassion.
Yeah. And it's also a good reminder that depression isn't just a feeling. It impacts every single aspect of our lives, including our most basic daily routines.
Yeah.
Another thing the research points out is excessive guilt. And, I mean, we all feel guilty sometimes, but when it's just this constant and overwhelming feeling, that can actually be a sign of depression as well.
Right.
It's about being able to distinguish, I think, between the healthy guilt that might motivate us to, make amends or learn from our mistakes versus this, really intense shame-based guilt.
Right. Yeah.
And that type of guilt can be so damaging.
Absolutely.
So how do we know if the guilt we are experiencing is healthy or if it's a sign of something more serious?
Well, that's one of those situations where therapy can be incredibly valuable. A good therapist can help you explore the root of your guilt, work on challenging those negative thought patterns, and develop much healthier ways of relating to yourself.
Therapy can be so helpful in those kinds of situations.
Really can.
This has been so insightful. I'm realizing there's so much more to depression than I initially thought.
Yeah.
And to add to that, the last sign that we're going to discuss is the connection between psoriasis and depression.
Oh, interesting.
I had no idea they were connected.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's a really great example of the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Research shows that depression can increase the risk of developing psoriasis. And conversely, living with psoriasis can also actually increase your risk of depression. It's this really complex interplay between our immune system, inflammation, and mental health.
Wow, it makes you realize how interconnected everything is. Our physical health, our mental health, these things aren't separate.
Not at all.
They're constantly influencing each other.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive here, I think the big takeaway is that depression, it can show up in the most unexpected ways. It's like a chameleon, right? Constantly changing its colors, blending in. So as you're reflecting on everything we've discussed today, what stands out to you most? Are there any signs that you might have overlooked in yourself or in someone you care about? And here's a final thought to ponder. If even our physical health can be a reflection of our mental state, how can we all use this knowledge to cultivate greater awareness and make sure we're taking care of both our mental and physical well-being? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.